And welcome back. Some information there from an official of the Election Commission. We're going to have a look at some of the comments you've shared on social media. My name is Tonata Kadila. You're watching Election Overview on One Africa. I'm also joined by David Bishop here in studio. Needs no introduction, by the way.
So we've seen there, obviously, the polling stations all still open, obviously open until 9 at least. We've still got teams who are out and about, so we're still going to be getting updates from a lot of the polling stations. Seeing a lot of chatter on social media, on Twitter, amongst other platforms. People talking about their experiences. Obviously, as we said earlier in the day, social media is sort of a new player in the elections, and everyone's on there. What do you do when you've got something to complain about? Well, you put it online so that everyone can see it.
And there's also great information that's being shared by you out there via these social platforms, and it also sort of makes the media think twice about how we cover these elections. We've got a couple of comments on the Future Media News platform on Facebook. 4 hours and counting, still in the queue. And there's also Lloyd Farmer, who says he's still waiting in the queue from 7 a.m. And Dion Winstand has been there since 8 in the morning. So a lot of people have really been in the queue for most of the day. Let's quickly talk about Margot, who's been at Lady Pohamba, I believe.
She was, yeah.
What did she say her experience was like?
So she was saying it was, an interesting experience. Again, it's that sort of shared suffering thing, that coming together. She was saying in the early part there was police presence and they were, controlling things. But then they presumably needed to go elsewhere and the police presence sort of disappeared. And there wasn't that much control by the election officials. Obviously, they've had a really tough day as well. I mean, we sit and we think about all the voters who are standing out in the sun. Those tents that a lot of those officials are in are not air conditioned. Those tents get hot inside. So the election officials haven't had a particularly nice day either, I don't think. They've been suffering a bit as well. But she was saying, the camaraderie, everyone sort of coming together and almost establishing their own rules, so to speak, about the line, so that you could say, if someone is visibly pregnant, yes, you go to the front of the line, but saying that only if the first 10 people agreed to allow someone in, and there were all these rules that were being developed to make sure that there wasn't any chaos, and the people all just came together, and that's something that to me has always stood out from Namibian elections, and it I don't know, maybe it happens in other countries as well, and maybe I only know about it because I've only experienced it in Namibia. But there is that sort of Namibian spirit of togetherness that, there's on social media and on those sorts of platforms. There's a lot of divisiveness, but I think we are all a lot more alike than we actually think. Yeah.
And we've also got here in studio, in the building, we've got Nrupesh Soni. He's collecting all the data on social media. He's putting it all together on an election dashboard. You can head over to futuremedianews.com.na/elections for all the videos, some of the comments. He's doing a fantastic job as well, seeing what the people are saying out there. Of course, not verified yet by the Electoral Commission, but we've seen stories of running out of ballot paper.
And some people actually mentioning on social media and saying, that's just some forward planning that could be done by the presiding officer. You don't have to wait until you run out. If you can see that you're on your last book and you stick your head out the door, and see I've got 30 pages in my book, but I've got 500 people standing outside, maybe make the call a little bit sooner to get another book of ballot papers sent to you. So 13 hours of being in a queue. I don't know. I think a lot of Namibians today deserve awards for queuing and awards for tenacity. I don't know if I would have been able to spend 13 hours sitting in a queue, one box for voting, saying that was really a failure, standing, waiting for the person to cast their vote because there's only one box for voting while there's a queue of more than 500 voters. Esther saying that was a dissatisfaction, which is quite a calm word to still be using a dissatisfaction. Well controlled there, Esther. People who couldn't stand the queue even gave up, which that is a concern. And if the turn up for voters is less this year, it should be blamed on the organization, says Esther. Interesting there. I'd seen some people commenting as well, saying, this would perhaps be a time for a very, very rare occurrence. I don't know if it actually has even happened in Namibia before, where someone, takes the blame and, sort of falls on the sword and says, listen, I messed up. I resign. I'm done. You see it in other countries.
Yeah, not here so much. But interestingly enough, also other voters at Baines, the queues. I know one of our producers here, Ray, he's saying the queue is long. And another journalist who works here is at Baines, and she says she's given up 3 times and has gone back, so she's going to go back again. But I think the key is to staying in that line.
Yeah.
If you really want to make a change, you've got to stay in the queue.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen pictures, people saying, somebody said that they're making new friends. They're taking the opportunity to find out about the people around them. Some people brought games along, so they're sitting playing card games with the people next door to them. Earlier today, I saw Anne, who works with us on Nova. She was waiting at the Centaurus voting station, and she actually took a photograph of a lady who had brought along a plastic trash bag, tied it onto the fence, and while she was waiting, she was walking around picking up rubbish and cleaning up around the Centaurus area.
So environment.
Whatever it takes, if you are in that queue, find whatever you need and stay in that queue and cast your vote.
Yeah, and we've observed with some of the interviews by the journalists here that some citizens chose to move to other areas of town to either avoid the heat, avoid a rowdy environment, or just make a different plan. And people are making their way, finding their way somehow to whichever polling station just to cast their vote.
You're seeing a lot of that on WhatsApp as well, on neighborhood watch groups. There's definitely a desire to vote. There's people who want to vote, but they're asking, and they're on the neighborhood watch WhatsApp group saying, where is quiet? Somebody tell me which one is the best one to go to.
Yeah.
So sharing that information, saying, this polling station is still very full, so maybe avoid this one, try one of the other ones. So there as well, technology again coming to the rescue in a way.
And speaking of technology, we've seen the Electoral Commission of Namibia now planning on having a press conference to address some of these issues. It will be live streamed, so I can't wait. There was also a rumor of perhaps, I don't want to put it out there, but giving us a bit more time. I'm not too sure about that, which would also be a first.
Well, I mean, even the giving it a bit more time, the mere fact that if you are in the line at 9, they have to wait for you to actually cast your vote before they can chase you away. I suppose that does, in a way, give you a bit more time. It'd be interesting to see how far that gets stretched, though. I mean, if we saw people camping out from midnight last night, are people then prepared to say, fine, I'm going to stand here until the sun comes up tomorrow morning?
12 to 12, plus 24 hours of voting. And if you're watching now, you can also head on over to our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, or X as they call it. We are on LinkedIn, on Instagram, which the young people love very much. Send us your videos, your experience, and we can share it with you right here.
And when we get back, economist Robert McGregor will be coming in. Some more of the expert analysis that we have lined up for you. Also, of course, from Cirrus Capital. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly with an interview with Robert McGregor.
Hey, ma'am.
How are you?
Very good, ma'am. How are you, ma'am?
I'm well. Can you please tell us your name and your age?
My name is Paulo Senos Nipangerwa. I'm 18 years old, grade 11 at Agustin Secondary School.
So how long have you been in the queue today?
It's about probably 3 hours, and it's very sunny around here. I've been standing here for 3 hours without no chair. But I'm excited to vote, because for the voting process we need a new president candidate, and we want to see the changes that will be made in the country, like job opportunity, safety nets in the country, and protection services like police, defense, and so.
Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine. Good afternoon.
Kindly introduce yourself and tell us how long have you been in the queue?
My name is Beata Shikomba. I'm 20 years old. I have been in queue maybe from 7 o'clock until now. And it's too hot. We don't have a chair. And sure.
And
So
how is your experience as a first-time voter?
I'm experienced like a lot of challenge.
And what are your expectations as a young voter? What is that one thing that you would want to see like change in the country?
I just want to change, like people must get their job. And
Are you employed?
no, I'm not. I'm schooling.
All right. Thank you so much. All right.
Yeah.
Ewa. Okujja tatamekere po 7 na okujja ano tavenderera otaveya enda watutrayinga ngo unene uli faster ya muntu pamwe kuchangone because of we are using different verifications and the Ai fio papa inatusakanikana nande omashongo numba pa yuke shasha tunapongone apolifi abatave tubatere popo baturepo erandura fano hororwa
kokutya ethimbo ndijja nguro nene okwenganye penere inadiri bali ono kwenye tatopola epipi lya kupe na bunjuka
Covered so far with regards to the election today. Just maybe provide us with an update in terms of were there any incidences of chaos reported, how has it been this far?
When you are ready.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay. Yeah, regarding the election day, we are so far we are happy. Here and there, we are receiving incidences, but it's manageable. We are on the ground. We make sure that it is addressed. Remember that we are saying that it's only 2 members that we have been that are deployed at various polling stations. Now these 2 members will now, if they need reinforcement, they will notify us, and based on that, if there is a situation that needs our assistance, that needs reinforcement, then we send in our members that are on standby duties. But otherwise, our members are on the ground, and we have received, yes, minimal, not that much, not that serious, again, incidences that were reported. But yeah, as I said, things we are doing what is needed. We send our members for reinforcement, but otherwise, yes, we are on top.
Speaking with regards to reinforcement, we've just witnessed a briefing here that took place with regards to the staff members of the security cluster. Maybe just give us a brief update on what briefing took place now.
Yeah, as we said earlier, we have security cluster. We are 4 to 5 different security institutions that are together, just to make sure that everything goes according to plan. Safety and security is number one. To make sure that security of all institutions are on board. Therefore, we found we created Joint Operation Center, and through that one, that is how we are addressing. Now, the members that you see here, these are members that are on standby. These are members that will be deployed. If need be, they will reinforce the other 2 members. But other than that, these are the members that will also move.
And it is 8 o'clock in the evening. Welcome back to Election Overview. It's been a long day for a lot of people. One of those people is Cirrus Capital economist Robert McGregor, who I have in the studio with me. Robert, how are you doing?
I'm pretty tired. It has been a long day, but I think worthwhile.
Okay, so where did you go and cast your vote?
In Olympia.
Okay.
I was at the United Rugby Fields. I think the queues there were quite long. They moved a bit slowly. When we left, the queues were effectively as long as when we got there early this morning. So I think a longer day ahead probably for a lot of other people.
All right. And standing in the line there, the sort of atmosphere, was it a shared suffering camaraderie? Were there tempers?
I think not that unsurprising, no real major tempers. I think a lot of sort of that, shared suffering camaraderie, a lot of people. I think what surprised me was a lot of young people who probably haven't voted before coming out to vote. A lot of sort of people around my age or younger, which I think is very encouraging to see. And I think a lot of eagerness and willingness to stay in the line no matter how slowly it moved.
Yeah, I think we've seen that. Definitely there's a tenacity to the voters that they're not leaving. They want to be able to cast their vote. And like you say, a lot of people, this is their first chance to do this, and they're excited to do this. They don't want to lose that opportunity. Obviously, how does that sort of play into expectations that we had going into these elections as to which way things could go? If we're seeing this tenacity of the youth, are they there specifically because they want to vote for change, or are they there specifically because they need to hold on to the way things are?
So this is something where polling normally gives you a really helpful idea, and we don't have that in Namibia. But if I look at sort of the data that South Africa had available, the low turnout scenarios typically tend to favor the incumbents. And I think it's typically or likely to be the same year if we just sort of try and extrapolate a little bit. I mean, if you look at a lot of the people, it's their first time voting. A lot of them have been eligible to vote before, but have chosen not to. So sort of disaffected voters or felt that there wasn't a need to. And so, I mean, I think the first encouraging sign is if we look at the registration rates that we had from the registration period, was it June, July, August this year? And I mean, an incredibly high registration rate, around 1.4 million Namibians.
Yeah, we're sitting at 90% of all eligible voters had registered,
which is incredibly high, I mean, by global standards. And so that's a first, I think firstly, they're a very big sign, especially if you compare that historically. And then I think we don't have turnout numbers. It could be like in South Africa, where on social media the expectation was that turnout was very high given the length of queues, the slow movement, but then turnout actually turned out to be quite low. I think around 57%, if I'm not mistaken. I suspect, and I'm hoping here, that it's in fact the opposite, that a lot of what we're seeing is due to some sort of technical or procedural issues, but also just large turnout by a lot of people willing to come out to vote. And then sort of to answer your question more directly there, I think, if it is a high turnout scenario, I think it's it's more likely to be something that will drive very different election results to what we've had in the past. I think you've got your typical voter base that has come out over the last 35 years, but with a lot of new people coming in, especially a young population who, quite honestly, the data shows the last 10 years have not been good. They won't be voting for a continuation of the last 10 years.
How do you think, will that waiting in line actually sort of play into that disillusionment? If the voters were sort of sitting perhaps a little bit on the fence, saying I have certain loyalties to one party, but I feel a little bit inclined to vote for another party. Do you think the fact that you've now stood in a line for 7 hours, will you be upset enough to say, right, this has pushed me over the line?
I think the first question is, have you got the tenacity to really stay in that line for that long. And then I think from there, I mean, it might be, it's difficult to say. I think if you've got a loyalty, I don't think the circumstances will change it that easily. I think there might be a few fringe voters who will go and say, this is, maybe we do need to try something different. But I think, I mean, if there is a real loyalty, if you were likely willing to queue for as long as you have, and so I don't see it changing sort of the fringe voters as much as easily.
Okay, let's look back quickly at some of the issues that we have said are driving these elections. The main sort of things, the main talking points, obviously, the unemployment figures that we don't actually know the official ones of, the homelessness crisis, all those sorts of things. Those are obviously still high on people's agenda and radar going into these elections.
Definitely. And I mean, again, with the limited data we have, if you look at who tend to be affected by things like unemployment, I mean, the data very clearly, even though it is, about 6 or 7 years outdated now, shows that unemployment the impact is far larger on younger people than older people. There's substantial differences in the unemployment rate for people from the ages of, say, 15 or 18 up to 35 than it is for people, say, 45 to 60. And that's definitely, I think, for a lot of people, that large proportion of people who are unemployed, that is the first thing on their mind. I think, obviously, the land and housing challenges are a massive one. And then I think, I mean, to a large extent, sort of access to basic services. So, I mean, if you just consider sort of access to water and electricity, drinking water, pipe drinking water, and not, I'm not talking about, walking to a tap 10 kilometers from your home, but sort of within your own home or immediate vicinity, access to electricity. I mean, we've really been doing quite poorly on those over the last 10 years as well. And I think, that will come to the mind a lot of these people. So, often what we tend to see is a lot of opinions and views and examples from sort of people that are fairly privileged. If you look at the demographics we have in the country, right? People who are employed, they've got a house, they likely own it if they're not renting it. They do have running water, they've got toilets, they've got electricity. But there's a shocking proportion of the population that, 35 years after independence hasn't seen that. And I think for the first sort of 20 to 25 years, if you look at the census data, the household income and expenditure surveys, the intercensus surveys, and similar, you can see that there has been, over these periods, some level of progress. But I think the two challenges are that I think since around 2015, we've likely stalled to some extent, given the limited data we have subsequent to 2015. But in addition to that, we have very limited data subsequent to then. So we don't really know what that situation is. It could be better, but there's a very, very good chance that for a lot of people it's gotten worse. And that will definitely, I think, drive and be front of mind for a lot of people who are willing to stand in line and say, the last 10 years haven't worked for me.
And I mean, the sort of demographics of the country where we have this massive sort of youth base, how has that changed from previous elections where there was always the sort of feeling of, nothing is certain until the numbers come in from the O regions? Are the O regions still as important as they were?
I think, I mean, if you just look at the sort of density within the different regions, definitely. The O regions are still by far the most populous, and so collectively account for a large share. I think it has decreased a little bit to some extent. I haven't looked at the numbers for a few weeks now, and so I'm going off of a very, very shoddy memory at this stage. But I think they definitely still matter the most. You do have some areas that have urbanized, especially the Ronga region and the Khomas region, which also still do matter. But naturally, I mean, if you look, the population density in that area is incredibly high, and so that will definitely drive to a large extent what we should be seeing once we start getting the first results.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the high turnout from the youth, were there any parties that were specifically targeting that? I mean, we saw a lot of the manifestos, we saw the checklists, so to speak, where we'll talk about jobs, we'll talk about housing, we'll talk about those sorts of things, but was there anyone specifically saying, look, we're here for you as the youth of the nation?
So I think, I mean, a lot of people were trying to push that angle. Whether they've done that successfully is an entirely different question, and I think that's quite challenging. So I haven't been focusing on every campaign and every party in great detail to exactly what they have done. But I think what's very clear is a lot of parties have been trying to push that angle and say, all right, we're focusing on the youth through XYZ. Now, generally, a lot of those statements, if you go through a lot of the manifestos and some of the reports and similar, is a case of sort of very generic statements. We focus on youth, but it's sort of in very broad terms. It's not a very, very sort of detailed focus on exactly how we're going to address this. I think the other challenge is that, and I think we see this elsewhere within the sub-region as well, is a lot of the policies that tend to draw in that youth vote or that youth following tend to be quite populist policies, right? It's quite frankly the easy solutions that people are wanting, which don't necessarily fix the problem or are a short-term solution which result in much longer-term consequences. Rent control is a very, very good example. Nowhere that it's tried has it been successful. In fact, it's only ever made things worse, right? But to a lot of young people who are sitting unemployed, unable to afford a house, or rent, let alone a house, it sounds like a good solution, right? But if you delve into the details, it doesn't work, and so that might draw some following. But I think what's been very clear is that the ruling party, to a large extent, has fallen out of favour with the youth, given what the last 10 years have brought for them. And I think that might sway a lot of support for a variety of the opposition parties. And I think to some extent, we might see some movement there for, I think, affirmative repositioning to some extent, speaking sort of to that language, and to some extent some of those populist policies, but also others like the Landless People's Movement.
Okay.
And I think also sort of some of the fresh blood, the IPC and some of the others.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back with Robert in just a little while, but right now we need to break for some ads.
Catch me, Script, and me, Mooks, on Final Whistle.
You're right.
So I'm thinking of the words as they come into my head.
7:30 p.m. Only on One App.
Feels way worse than the last time I did this with me.
Well, it's working all right.
Come rain or shine, OneAfrica.tv is faithful anytime, anywhere.
Which subjects can you learn on Learn on One?
English, science, mathematics.
Is she correct? Yes. What's your name, ma'am? Julia. What grades are available on Learn on One? Grade 1 to yes. Is she correct? She's getting a goodie bag.
Thank you for staying with us here on Election Overview. I've got Cirrus Capital economist Robert McGregor in the studio with me. Before we broke for the ads, Robert, we were talking about those populist policies. That has been a criticism, I think, of some of the manifestos. Not so much the populist policies, necessarily, but the sort of lack of explanation that people were saying in a lot of the manifestos. It's easy to say you're going to do something, but we need to know how you actually plan on doing that.
Yeah, I think that is a big criticism. So I mean, last time we spoke, I made the point that I think, frankly, the manifestos themselves are a big question, because I mean, how many people truly look at a manifesto, right? It feels like it's a formality. People complain if you don't put one out, but I mean, a fraction of the population even bothers to read them. And I mean, a lot of the people I've spoken to have said, yeah, they haven't even bothered, right? Or they would like to, but they don't have the time, or it's too long, or something along those lines. But I think that is the thing, is you get a lot of these which are, say, 40-50 page documents, and they make grand promises, but it's easy to make those promises, right? We're going to create jobs, we're going to build houses. The big question mark, and this is where I think a lot of the manifestos, or at least the promises from some of the parties are lacking, is it's easy to say we're going to do this. The big question for me, and this goes to almost every party, really, is exactly how, right? It's easy to make the promise. Some will likely never have to live up to it because they won't have sufficient following to gather enough seats in the National Assembly, and so then it's easy. You can say we've promised this, but we didn't get the mandate, and so tough luck. But I think to a large extent we see very broad generalizations, but there's no detail on, right, how are we going to create 500,000 jobs over 5 to 10 years? We've struggled to do that over the last 10, 15 years. What is going to be different? What are the precise policies that you're going to do? Are you going to, what are you going to do to drive that? Are you going to do it through government employment? Government employment is going to be through the private sector. How are you going to stimulate that? It's easy to say, we'll look at building or servicing 10,000 earths each year, right? But exactly how? Where's that money going to come from? How much do you think it's going to cost you? Does our budget currently have sufficient funding available for that? Are you going to direct funding from elsewhere? Where's it going to be? It also doesn't help if you do it in areas where you've got lower population density, or if you focus on rural areas when everyone's flocking to urban areas. So I think a lot of that detail is lacking. So we've got these very, very long documents, but a lot of them are very thin on sort of the detail and the functionality and how we're going to achieve those stated objectives.
So we've seen internationally that they're not necessarily a cure-all, but do you think that perhaps something like debates between the presidential candidates, opening themselves up to a bit more scrutiny, is that something we should be looking at for the next set of elections, or demanding?
I definitely think so. I think what's very clear is we get told about these politicians, and you might go to a rally where they've got a prepared speech, right? And for most people, not for everyone, but for most people, it's fairly easy to read a speech, and especially if you've had some practice. But I think being in a debate where you have to think on your feet, you don't have someone to prepare you, to guide you in advance. You have to know what you're talking about. And I think that could speak to a lot of voters to say, all right, well, I had this perception of candidate X, but they performed very, very poorly. Maybe I need to reconsider. Or they say this when they're in front of us, but they say that on TV. Maybe we need to think about someone else. And so I don't think it can do any harm, at least to the voting population. It might do harm to a politician's career, but that's I think for the greater good, it's the right way to go, is to see who am I truly voting for. Are they capable when they're under pressure as well? And I think that's a very important thing. So I think it is something we should push. I don't think it should be above anyone. I think that's a big criticism that I saw in South Africa, for instance, where within the ruling party there wasn't a willingness to do much engagement with the media at all, let alone on a debate. And I think here we should be demanding that of our politicians, is to say, all right, you need to be able to think on your feet. You need to go up against each other and say, why should we vote for you? And I think a lot of the canvassing of votes that we see is not so much why we as the population should vote for a specific party. It's not what the party has done to earn those votes. It's not what those parties have done in the last 5 or 10 years to earn that support. It's very much a case of, we've been doing this, or we're promising this, that's why you must do it. It feels almost like a bit of an entitlement as opposed to really earning that support.
Speaking of promises, and there's a lot of sort of promises for the future in terms of things like green hydrogen or the oil and gas. Are those something that you think are seen as belonging to a certain party? They're obviously things for the future, regardless of who ends up in government following these elections. They will still be there. But do you think in the voters' mind that there was a sort of specific drive to take ownership of those?
So I think, something that we don't have that's very clear in Namibia, as we do have elsewhere in the world, is that there is here a bit of a conflation, or I think likely within the region, a conflation between party and state, right? We've got the state, which is this apparatus that runs the country. It's the day-to-day, whereas your political party that's running the country is effectively steering the ship, right? And the state should be the ship itself. And we have a very, very big conflation there. It's largely seen as one and the same, which to me has its own challenges. I think what we have seen is trying to push to, again, do both of these, right? It's the government that's pushing it, but also ownership of some of these to an extent as a political party. I think green hydrogen is a very good example there, and I think we've seen a lot of the opposition parties have now moved against it. And I think there's also been, at least from what I've seen, a big amongst the general population, a move away from it. Right, the sort of the general sentiment towards it has changed quite dramatically over the past 12 or 18 months from when it was first introduced. And I think there's some risk with that. I do think that what a lot of people have realized as well is the focus on a specific item like this is really not in the voters' interest, right? There isn't a single silver bullet that's going to cure all of our challenges, and I think that's what has frustrated the voters and changed a lot of the sentiment. And there, the risk is that something like this, especially if it doesn't pan out over the next couple of years, is that it might end up being a poison chalice.
I mean, and the sort of oil and gas industry and even green hydrogen, if it were to sort of bring in the influx of, foreign expertise, foreign workers, foreign direct investment, the investment obviously a good thing, but there are negative consequences to this if we're looking at things like we already have a housing crisis. Now we're looking at suddenly having how many more hundreds of workers coming in, people needing with families, needing somewhere to stay, inflation rate going up at the same time.
Yeah, so I do think those are challenges, and again, this is where a lot of the parties talk about, we'll renegotiate things, right? And it's easy to say that again, but bear in mind that if we look at oil and gas, for example, the exploration that has taken place and that is taking place is incredibly high risk. It's very expensive, right? Wells costs in the region of, I think, around $100 million, right? And there's no guarantee. I mean, those wells that were sunk 4 or 5 years ago, the first by Shell and Total, or Total Energy, there's no guarantee that they're going to hit anything. So you're spending, bucket loads of money in the hopes that you find something with a very, very high chance, actually a greater chance that you won't find anything. And so the exploration is obviously already very expensive. It's money that you've spent that you're not guaranteed to get back. If you make a positive discovery, you would obviously like to get some of that money back. And if you develop, there's obviously operational costs. You want to get a decent return for the risk you've taken as well as the work you're doing to get that out. So now to go and say, all right, well, we're just going to renegotiate everything. It sounds great, right? It sounds easy. Oh, yes, we're just going to win. But there's a flip side to that coin, and it's very easy that you can chase people away by doing that. And then again, so you sit with something like oil and gas, it's still not guaranteed, it's not certain. But if it were to go ahead, the opportunity there is massive. It could be completely transformational for a country as small as ours. I mean, the quantums of money involved in a country with a population of 3 million people, if done correctly, if spent correctly, could easily resolve many, if not all, of our challenges. Not immediately, but over the next generation or two. And I think, we need to be forward-looking with it. But to say, all right, well, we're just going to renegotiate everything, it's not to say that that's going to be that easily done or that successful. You've got people on the other side of the table that are saying, well, these are our terms, and the fact of the matter is, if we don't like what's being offered, we can turn away and say, no, we have other prospects.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. We're going to let you get to your bed. I know you've had a very long couple of days, so thank you so much for being willing to still come in and chat to us here on Election Overview.
No, thanks for having me again.
And thank you again to all of you for joining us. This is day 2 of our coverage. Of course, today is election day. Still around about 40 minutes until the stations are set to officially close. We have heard murmurs of an announcement from the ECN, so we will stand by and bring that to you as soon as we hear anything else. Stay with us.
Election Overview.
Only one toilet, which everybody is using, and now it's full. And we don't understand why ECN didn't make even any plan. Look, they are also using what we call this electrical, the generator. And we are in the city center. No, it's really not okay. Especially on the toilet side, people are now standing there for all those hours. If it's possible, they can consult municipality. This is the election day. It's an important day. Stakeholder engagement is supposed to be. Now you are told the toilet is full. Just that one toilet. Just take a picture also for that toilet. And you look now to the public toilet that are closed. Oh. No.
All right. Thank you,
It's
sir.
serious.
Men and women
Yeah.
also.
Men and women, they are going in the same toilet. Even the officer. But as we are talking, the toilet is full. Maybe, we don't know, maybe the municipality want people to use what now? No, that's only what we can complain. Yeah.
Okay.
And the queue is even moving slowly. We came here a long time ago. We are here, now it's already 3 o'clock.
When you say you came here a long time ago, perhaps maybe just to find out the specific time. What time did you come?
6:30, I'm already here. Yeah, and I'm still here, not voting. And this is now 3:03. Yeah, and things are just moving slowly.
Election overview. Election overview. Election Overview 2024. Empowering you to make informed decisions.
And welcome back. We're in the final stretch of our live program today. It's been D-Day, very busy day all across the country. And I suppose it's time for us to wrap it up. But before we do so, we're going to cross over to Envalde, who's at the Electoral Commission of Namibia, for the latest update.
Hi to Nata, hi to the viewers. We are here at the Electoral Commission of Namibia's head office in Windhoek. The team has been to a lot of polling stations during the day and the early morning hours. But even now, with 30 minutes to go before all the polling stations close, you can still see the lines of Namibians willing to cast their votes. Like I've mentioned earlier, it's very interesting that especially the young people are still lined up in the queues. They carry their lunch boxes, their camping chairs, their everything just to make sure that they cast their vote. It's interesting, we spoke to the chairperson in the morning who said the Namibian population should expect to get the results as of the 30th, which should be Saturday. And also, we are waiting for an update now from the ECN. They said they would hold a press conference just to give an update of how many people have casted their vote so far, which has not unfortunately happened at the moment. But in the morning, at around 10, they have mentioned that by that time, 100,000 people have casted their votes. Also, we've been to, or we've spoken to a lot of presiding officers at the polling stations, where some have said they were running out of the polling paper, polling or the ballot papers rather, which they expected delivery from the main supplier, which is the headquarters. Other than that, the team will continue to inspect most of these polling stations, and then we will give an update on our social medias, otherwise tomorrow morning.
Thank you so much for that update, and thank you for the fantastic work you guys have done in the field.
Thanks a lot.
Right, there you have it. There you have it, an update from Envalde, who is at the Electoral Commission of Namibia. A lot of journalists stationed there tonight, camping there tonight, just to get access to that information. David?
Yeah, I think a lot of people were hoping for that press conference. A lot of people are still hoping for answers, waiting for answers. We've been told repeatedly by various different officials that if you are in the queue at 9 o'clock, that you are allowed to stay in that queue until you have cast your vote, that you won't be turned away. But yeah, there's a lot of talk about, with all the issues, was there going to be an extension? Some talk even around creating a second day of voting, which obviously brings around a lot of its own problems, a lot of its own issues, logistically, security, budget, exactly, even the cost to the economy of another full public holiday, being declared. So yeah, a bit unfortunate that we haven't gotten any answers from the ECN. I think a bit unfortunate that the ECN has been a bit more quiet than they should have been today. I think one of the sort of first steps in any kind of crisis management is be transparent and be vocal. Don't
don't keep quiet.
Don't keep quiet. Exactly. So I would have liked to have seen a bit more of the ECN today. Taking ownership of the issues that have been seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And accountability for those ballot papers. I know on some of the WhatsApp groups, I know my director is telling me to stop talking, but just to clarify, on the WhatsApp group, the Electoral Commission of Namibia this evening announced that they will give out a statement. So we'll wait for that. And some of the journalists, Yasko from Hit Radio, said, what about our questions? Similar to you. But we'll find out tomorrow. We've got a great lineup tomorrow. Politicians coming in from all of the various parties to reflect and obviously give a sort of post-mortem of what happened on the ground today. So you can catch that tomorrow morning. We'll be back at 7 a.m. David will be on Nova Sunrise if you'd like to engage on that platform. But from me, Tonata Kadila, it's been awesome.
Yeah, and from me, David Bishop, thank you very much for having spent your day with us on Election Overview. We'll chat to you again tomorrow.
Election Overview 2024. Empowering you to make informed decisions.